Hello, and welcome to Millennials Gone Circular, the podcast that's helping you make circularity a reality. My name is Caitlin Sockwell with co-hosts Angelica and Saeed. In episode 2, we define sustainability and circularity. But today we'll be taking things a step further and talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, and where circularity fits in. This is episode 3, Achieving the SDGs with Circularity. This is Millennials Gone Circular. Hello, and welcome to episode 3. My name is Caitlin, and I'm joined here by my two very good friends and sustainability enthusiasts, Angelica and Saeed. How are you both?
Hello, guys, again. Another nice Saturday for us. Very good, Ashley. How about you, Saeed?
Great. I think it's a special day. I feel like
Yeah.
the spring is here already. It's nice weather here in Belgium. And also it's especially because it's International Women's Day. I don't know if you have
Yay.
realized. And yeah, so happy International Women's Day. And I think it's perfect because we will see that it's linked to our episode today. I will not spoil it. So back to you, Caitlin.
Lovely. Yeah,
Yeah, thank
absolutely.
you.
It's happy Women's Day to you, Angelica, and
Thank you.
to all the women listening to this podcast, or the mums or the sisters or the aunts or the friends of our listeners. It's a very special day. But I'm also feeling the optimism that spring is bringing us as well. Today is 19 degrees in the Netherlands, and the sun's out, and I suddenly remember what life is all about. It's
Yeah.
sitting outside in the sun and having a little ice drink, and it's been beautiful. I feel like I've woken up from a hibernation.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, great. So
And the hashtag of the International Women's Day this year is Accelerate Action. And there was like, maybe we could take a moment and see your reflection on that, and how do you, if you can relate, or
what can
do
you
you
repeat the hashtag, Saeed?
accelerate action?
Accelerate action. Ooh, that is
I
a
like it.
very good one and super relevant to today's episode.
Mm.
Let's come back to that, because I think
Yeah.
we need to prime our brains. We've got a lot to chat about, and I think that'll be a really great thing for us to reflect on at the end of the episode, as well as our listeners.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So for those of us joining, in our last episode, we took a very deep dive, I'd say, into the concepts of sustainability and circularity. And we briefly mentioned that the SDGs were sort of our metrics or goals that we use to guide us towards achieving sustainability. But Angelica, Saeed, and I thought the SDGs deserve their own special deep dive. So that's what we're going to do today. But first, Angelica, can you take us through our good sustainability news for the day?
Okay, so here are our positive news of the day. So on December 13, 2024, in an historic move, the International Court of Justice is examining nations' legal obligation to combat climate change. Triggered by 2023 UN request, the case aims to clarify countries' responsibilities to protect the climate system and potential consequences for inaction. Now, in February 18, 2025, multi-stakeholder initiatives, including Ethical Trading Initiative, NGOs, and International Labour Organization, are pushing for stronger ethical trading standards and strict rules to promote and improve social sustainability. And finally, on January 16, 2025, the World Economic Forum highlights how ESG initiatives are driving economic growth. Investors are increasingly prioritizing SDGs, with studies linking it to stronger financial performance. So that's what we get. We are improving in many areas, so that's very good for the planet and for societies.
A bit of hope, a bit of good news, like we like to share. Excellent. Especially positive hearing that investors are prioritizing more the ESG component, which is fantastic. All right. Okay, well, let's just get stuck right into it, I think. I think a very good logical place to start is, what are the SDGs? What are we talking about? All right. Thank you so much, Angelica. Really, really inspiring stuff to hear. Lots of positive things happening, especially around the ESG initiatives that investors are now starting to increasingly prioritize. That's awesome. Okay, well, I think it's time for the main event. And I think the logical question to answer first here is, what even are the SDGs? So the SDGs stands for Sustainable Development Goals, and they were brought in by the United Nations. There are 17 global goals, and they were adopted in 2015, and they address issues like poverty, inequity, and climate change. As I said, there's 17 goals. I'm not going to read through all of them right now, but we'll put a link in the show notes, and you'll be able to go back and look at the pretty little colorful visual we have. While there's 17 goals, each of the goals has little smaller objectives to meet so that they can help achieve the overall goal, to make it a bit more specific and actionable. So the SDGs serve as a bit of a blueprint for a better future, and many are directly linked to circularity. So some of the most relevant SDGs that link to circularity are SDG 12, so that's responsible consumption and production, my personal favorite, as we'll talk about later. But circularity, when we have circular practices in place, we reduce waste and we promote sustainable business models, which this helps push SDG 12 forward. Then we've got SDG 13, which is climate action. Circular economy strategies tend to reduce carbon emissions, which directly links to climate action. And again, this is a series that we'll dive into a little bit later in the season. We've got SDG 9, which is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So circular practices drive sustainable industrialization. I know industrialization, that's such a big word, but basically meaning that we're using materials, we're designing out waste, and we're using materials in the things that we create for our infrastructure as well. Then we've got SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation. When we have a circular economy or a circular society, we improve resource efficiency and we reduce pollution, i.e. in our drinking water and oceans. SDG 15, which is life on land, and SDG 14, which is life below water. Circularity acts directly on these to reduce environmental degradation. So when we are designing out waste, there's less waste to enter our environment, less waste to pollute our environment, both on land and water. So they're very, very linked. In saying that, all the SDGs are linked, so not just the ones I mentioned, and no one of them can be achieved in isolation without achieving the others. So I guess with that logic, circular economy affects all of the SDGs. But let's step back a little bit and take a look at where the SDGs come from. We didn't just suddenly wake up and we had these goals. Angelica, can you give us a bit more of a rundown?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for me, it will be the starting of everything, of course, according to like the most official definitions that is still like now they valid. Everything started in the Brundtland Report, as we mentioned in the last time, which was created in 1987. And that's what says the most official and first definition of what sustainability is, or sustainable development, to be more specific. And from there on, we started like approaching other topics that were very also important to understand in order to develop these sustainable goals, right? So for example, the first thing that we do in order to understand sustainable development as we understand it now is define the difference between the beginning of an understanding of sustainable development, that it was called the model of weak sustainability, which is basically where we started thinking as sustainability as the Mickey Mouse model, right? As it's defined by professors in different universities, but in this case, Lund's University, I'm taking the reference, where in this model, economy is in the main circle, let's put it in this way, in the center, and then social and environment are just like two added things. And then we have the other, let's say, type of sustainability or sustainable development model that we use today, that is a nest model, where we have environment like as the big one that surrounds everything else, and then we have social, and then we have economic. So in this
Like
order of
bunch
ideas,
nesting dolls.
yeah, exactly. So based on like academics, this is more or less the way that we started approaching sustainable development in a more conscious way and not in an anthropocentric point of view, right? Which is basically where everything is surrounded by human needs. So that was the first thing. I think for me, it's one of the most important or key things to understand sustainable development. So based on the second one, that it's what we consider nowadays as strong sustainability models, the sustainable development goals of the millennia that were created in the 2000s were based. So once that we get this first approach of a strong sustainability and how we should develop sustainability for the different global contexts, is that we can start speaking about the Paris Agreement in 2015 and the 17 goals that were developed afterwards. But now with a more nested sustainability model, that it's basically where we understand that without planet, there is nothing else to do, right? Because in the previous model, we thought, oh, no, yeah, but we have to center everything around economy, right? Because that's how we are going to cover the human needs. But actually, afterwards, we realized, no, we cannot cover human needs without the planet, right? So that would be like the main things for me to highlight when it comes to the history of how we came up to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Perfect. It's really interesting. They had to sort of define sustainable development first, right? And
yeah,
I really like how you've outlined the progression of the Minnie Mouse, and then they went, oh, hang on, what do we push those ears back in? They all kind of interlink.
yeah.
So we've developed this sort of model of sustainable development, and then I think one of the important things is the SDGs are officially known as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So that's why we're talking about sustainable development here. It represents sustainable development. And all of the goals, like I mentioned before, were adopted in 2015 by 193 UN member states. Just quickly, I think in 1992, there was a first draft, the Agenda 21, and that was sort of a global partnership to improve human lives and protect the environment. It was kind of the beta version of the SDGs, if you will. And then in September 2000, in September 2000, at the UN headquarters in New York, that's where they had the Millennial Summit. Where were we? I think I was 6.
Yeah, very little actually.
Yeah, it was literally called the Millennium Summit, and they developed 8 Millennium Development Goals. And those had more focus on reducing extreme poverty by 2015. Last time I checked, 2015 has come and gone, and unfortunately, we still have extreme poverty, but a lot has improved in that space, which is great. But then fast forward to the Rio 20 in 2012, that's where they started to launch a process to develop the SDGs and build a little bit more on these Millennium Development Goals.
Yeah, totally. Just like a very curious fact that I found in also about the country where I'm living in, which is now Sweden. Like actually Sweden in 1999, just 1 year before the millennial objective, they have the National Environmental Quality Objective that were also like a very similar model that the one that we developed in the next year in the 2000. So that was also very interesting for me to find out in this research about the SDGs.
Yeah, very cool, and kind of something to be proud of living in Sweden.
Do you think something like that happened also in Netherlands or maybe in Belgium side that you know?
Surely. Surely. I mean, the Netherlands seems to have their fingers in a lot of sustainability pies, so I would be surprised if they weren't, but you never know. Yeah. But I guess, so once we had the Rio Summit in 2012, there was a working group, and then by 2015, they said, okay, we're good to launch these goals. We've had umpteen years to work on them. And 2015 was actually a pretty big year for sustainability. So, of course, we had the SDGs, But then we also had the disaster risk reduction. We had financing for development and the Paris Agreement. They all took place in that year. So now we are, 10 years on. And it'd be really great to kind of have an overview from all of those initiatives, a 10-year reunion, if you will.
Yeah, totally. Now that you mentioned that also, Caitlin, on 2015, we also have the declaration that established the Science-Based Targets Initiative, that they're also totally focused to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, but they are key also, of course, for sustainable development, because basically, like all humans, we develop our societies in terms of the climate and the temperature we live in, right? And that affects social and economical perspective. So as you said, it was exactly like that. Also, the Science-Based Initiative was also launched in that same year. So 2015 was the year for sustainability and circularity, if you think about it.
Yeah, wowza. What were you doing, Saeed, in 2015? I'm trying to think myself.
I think said high school.
2015?
No, not the high school, but the first year at the university.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like math, physics,
Yeah.
students, so nothing
Cool.
to do with SDGs.
Fair, that's fair.
Yeah.
Neither. So Saeed, maybe you can give us, I know we touched on it a little bit chatting through the SDGs, but maybe you can give us a little bit more insight around how the circular economy helps us achieve the SDGs. Like we're a podcast about circularity, sustainability, and we try and link the circularity to the topic that we're talking about. So can you form that connection for us?
Yes, I think this must have been already clear for some of our listeners, which is, I think, relatable if you are in the area. But the circular economy indeed is a tool to achieve sustainability and by extension, the SDGs. Um, and maybe we can take a look at some examples to make it further clear. For instance, when we talk about product as a service business model, we contribute to reduce waste and achieve closed loops in the production. And this also enables reduced resource extraction. And this is all about SDG 12. Another example.
Can I chime in there, Saeed? Because I think I just want a product as a service. So what we mean by that is instead of, for example, we've got a bike store here called Swap Fiets in the Netherlands. So instead of going to the store and buying that product to own, you buy it as a service. So you lease it and they take care of all the repairs and that sort of thing. So with Swap Fiets, you literally go and you pay a subscription to use this bike. If something breaks down or if you want a different model, you take it back and you swap it out, hence Swap Fiets. Fiets is the Dutch word for bike. So I think I really love that example for product as a service.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And by the way, we have it as well in Belgium, the same brand. And I think there are many other examples in the car, like car industry, for instance. And for instance, I think some home appliances are now being used as a service.
Yeah,
Also,
even light
phones.
bulbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, Philips.
So yeah,
has
it's
a light bulb thing.
it's definitely I think an interesting model. Moving on, maybe I can also take a look or talk about SDG 9, industry innovation and infrastructure. In fact, in circular economy encourages innovation at product and process design phases. For instance, we encourage our circular economy promotes modular design, which of course requires a sort of innovation in the process. Also, when it comes to repairable products and implementing industrial symbiosis, this also is all about innovation, finding a match between waste streams and raw materials, and also therefore like the infrastructure that is needed to achieve this sort of industrial symbiosis or industrial parks. Another interesting example is SDG 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. In fact, circular practices such as urban mining. Um, urban mining is all about, I think, to put it in a simple way, is to basically try to collect end of life or discarded products from households, from like businesses, from organization, and try to recover the materials that are inside those products. And maybe you can take the example of phones now. There are companies that are taking end of life or discarded phones, and then they recycle them and then recover precious metals, for instance, such as gold, platinum, and so on. Maybe I'll take another example. And last one probably is SDG 3, good health and well-being. Circular economy contributes to reducing pollutions and improved overall living quality, such as air and water quality. So this is also an area where circular economy, I think, enables quality of life. For instance, if we recycle water in the processing plants, we avoid the use of fresh water, and therefore like allow that fresh water to go to drinking water systems and so on.
Okay, so those are really great examples. And I think now that our listeners know a little bit more about what circularity is, now we have a little bit more of a foundation to keep an eye open during our everyday life for some real life examples. So you mentioned, Saeed, about urban mining and taking some phones back and mining the gold and copper and things out of that. That's a really great idea, or a really great example. We've also got landfill mining even. How crazy is that? We've said, oh, we're just going to bury this under some land and stick it in a landfill. And now we're going, oh, hang on, that was a lot of, there's a lot of valuable stuff in there that we just threw away. So yeah, keep your eye out for circularity examples and kind of understand how they might be linked, how they might be progressing these SDGs forward.
No, yeah, totally. And I also think like we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? If you analyze, it's just like circularity, or for example, one of the examples that I put about like recycling materials for construction, for example, is a practice that we have been doing since Middle Ages. Like for example, in like any statue in the Middle Ages that was made out of copper, they recycle every single gram of copper, because of course extracting copper, it was way much more like human labor consuming than it is right now. Like now it's just machines and they do everything automatically. But back in the days, it was way much more complex. So this is something that we have been doing for a while. We just need to keep it on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just going back to basics. But now we've just got terms for them now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think with all the examples that Saeed, you gave us, and you said circularity is the tool to achieve sustainability, and by extension the SDGs. That is absolutely all 100% real and right. But we also need to address the fact that governments, businesses, and individuals, so everyone on every level, we all have a role in closing SDG gaps through circularity, right? So on an individual level, we can vote by our wallets, we can email our representatives, we can contact the companies and express our, preferences to them, so they understand what we really want from the business world. The businesses have a right to comply with legislation and meet the consumer demands. And of course, government has a right to pass legislation and making sure that everything's in good order and it's driving the needle forward. But I just wanted to mention that it's always has to happen on 3 levels.
Yeah.
But okay, so now let's regroup. We've talked about the SDGs, what they are, how they came to be, how they are linked to circularity, and how circularity sort of helps address or achieve the goals. But where are we currently in terms of SDG progress? Like what is some of the, where are we now and what's holding us back?
Yeah, maybe I can jump into that. We refer to the United Nations 2023 SDG report. It's 8 years after the adoption, and it shows that only 15% of the SDGs targets are on track globally. That is shocking, I think. So, and then there 37 have stagnated or regressed. 37% to be precise. The other 48% are moderately or severely off track. So the conclusion is that we're off track, and therefore, I think it's really maybe a point where we should revise where our status and how we can move forward.
Yeah, and I think another point, last episode we spoke about how only 7.2% of the world economy is circular, which dropped from 9.1% in 2018. So there is a bit of correlation there, isn't there?
Yeah, indeed. And maybe I was thinking in terms of volumes. I think even though the percentage of circularity dropped, we can maybe argue that the volumes of materials that are being reused, for instance, I think we can argue that there is probably an improvement, I think, because we've seen a lot of industries trying to take action, implementing circularity practices. And I think it's because we have large volumes of materials extracted, virgin materials, leads to decrease the percentage. But when we think about volumes of circular materials, we can also see that there is probably a positive change in my view.
Yeah, it's a catch-22 because we've got materials going up. So the global material use has actually quadrupled since 1970, which kind of checks out, right? But what about gender? So we've talked about materials, and that is, I could talk about waste and materials all day, but what about gender? So it is International Women's Day. Where are we there?
Yeah, interesting, because indeed today is a special. It's International Women's Day, and it's good to take a look at gender equality. She's still like 300 years away to achieve the targets. For instance,
300. Did you say 300 years away, Saeed?
That's insane.
Wow.
Sorry?
You said 300. We're still 300 years away from gender equality.
Yes, indeed. These are the numbers we've got. For instance, 300 years away to end child marriage. Another shocking number. Another one is 286 years to close gaps in legal protection and remove discriminatory laws. and 140 years to achieve equal representation in leadership in the workplace. It's also, I think, shocking number, especially in the workplace, because nowadays many companies claiming to have progressed a lot, but one can see through this number that it's we're still far away
Yeah.
from even achieving half probably of the targets.
I saw something recently, probably on Insta, and it was a ranking of the top 20 best places for women to work in the world, and number one was Sweden.
Yay!
So congrats,
Yeah,
Angelica. Hit the jackpot on that. But there was still, there was still 1.4, 1 point something percent gap. There's still a gap.
Yeah, no, but it's very true. Like you barely can see the gap in Sweden. I totally agree. It's a great country for women to work and to live, and for freedom of speech and everything related to it. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but
so what can you weigh in, whoever would like to? What are our key barriers? Like why are we still 300 years away? Why are we what was only 15% achieving the SDGs? What's stopping us?
Well, actually, one of the first, I don't know, like comments that I saw from academia about this topic, it was more like about the fact that even though like this Brundtland report was created in 1987, there was a good perspective in this report about the fact that they try to cover everything under the same umbrella, like a more overview or nutshell perspective, and also trying to track all the sustainable development goals like at this in the same size or importance. And one of the critics about the sustainable development goals is like, number one, they are too isolated between each other. Ironically, that was exactly what we thought it would be the biggest advantage, but it has become a big of a disadvantage, because actually the planet is a whole system that needs to be seen as a one single organism. So that's one of the things that I found about it. And yeah, the second one is like, we don't target, and even the targets itself, the 169 targets of the 17 objective, they are not equally heavy, let's put it in that way, according to the importance that they actually meant for the planet. So that's the two critics that I found from academia, that it could be considered a barrier why we haven't achieved at this point, or why we are so backwards in terms of where we should be in sustainable development.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it. I would have assumed that all of the goals that we have in place were weighted in terms of importance, or you'd expect that was already worked out. But
apparently not.
Yeah. And I think another thing that we also touched on already in our positive news was funding, the topic of funding. It's good to hear that ESG funding from investors is increasing, but I think there's still a significantly insufficient funding, especially in developing countries, or the majority world countries. This is even worse given that wealthier countries are even more wealthy and are getting more wealthier, and they're often not as impacted as low-income countries are in terms of climate change, in terms of SDGs. So I think the funding, we need to do something about that. Saeed, what have you got? Any key barriers that come to mind for you?
I think you covered them already. I can point out, like from my point of view, the economy or the economic growth of the country or the states, like for instance in the south in general, is a big barrier, because of course without economic and social development, we're not able to even think about certain targets or certain SDGs, because they are like second parameters, or like not really the basics. I think like any human being, we want to cover the basic needs, and then we look at other things later on. And without that, it's really hard to achieve the SDGs goals. And that also, with that, we can correlate why developed countries such as Sweden, for instance, or Norway have way progressed than others. It's mainly, I think, social and economic growth.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got, someone in Africa who's just fighting to go to school, for example, and it's the main thing that's stopping her is her period, and she, that's affecting her. She doesn't care about the amount of waste she's generating.
Yeah.
Like that. She's just trying to survive and get a good education, and then make a living for herself. Yeah, I think that's a super point. But I might also just add that there's a bit of a lack of an awareness and engagement from the individual level. I think we get stuck in that mindset of, oh, I'm just a drop in the ocean. What I do doesn't matter, but it absolutely does. And when more people and more people and more people come together, that's when change and actions drive achieving these goals. And that's what we exist here for. That's what our podcast is for, to raise awareness and engagement from people all over the world.
Yeah, I think exactly the same, Caitlin. And also, like, in this same order of ideas, I was thinking about like academics. They talk a lot about something called systemic thinking, which is, I think, also we still lack. I know we have been doing a great progress when it comes to systemic thinking in sustainability, but we realize all the mistakes that we have done in the past. For example, if you look, that we will also leave you the link on this episode about the wolves of Yellowstone, where we completely misunderstood nature. And for example, how the wolves impacts an entire ecosystem, including changing the river's trajectory. Like you could imagine like how this could be related. That's exactly what sustainability, how complex and deep it is. Like, you cannot take out a single drop, as Caitlin said, of an ecosystem without an impact that for us humans, and with this like still lack of systemic thinking, it's very hard to see. So I'm not pointing the finger directly. Yeah, humans, we have been doing everything wrong, but definitely we still need to consider many more factors that I hope with technology we will.
I think so. We've got the technology, but
Yeah.
I like what you said about our ecosystem is so fragile. Messing with one thing has this ripple effect on everything else, and it comes back to those cycles again. Which we're going to do a series on climate change, and it's gonna make sense soon. So hang in there.
Yeah, we're going to talk about trophic cascades, guys. This is super important to understand climate change, and I think it's one of the most fun topics that I have ever seen.
Yeah, and something you learn, you're actually putting your high school biology classes to use here. So
yeah, it's true.
Okay, so we're falling a bit short of the SDGs, which really is no surprise. But if we're going to achieve these goals, how can we accelerate action? What can we do?
I can maybe mention some. I think first is to direct funding to where is needed and increase funding as well. We can also mention strengthen the global policies and make sure entities taking action are accountable and also are reporting on their actions. We need also, I think, harmonization of policies globally in order to be able to track the goals in a more like systemic way, because I think we cannot like measure how advanced or like the progression of SDGs in Europe as in Africa. it's not the same. So I think harmonization is key as well. Another one would be to try to incorporate and scale circular business models and innovation. Many companies are and also countries, let's be honest, they are still relying on linear business models, extraction of virgin materials and fossil fuels is still like a business as usual. So it's time to really to rethink the way we do business today, and also try to enhance the current positive and let's say the circular initiative or circular economy initiative. I think there's so many worldwide already, and it's key to scale them and invest further in them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to the barrier that we talked about before, financing. So yeah, financing is definitely something that we need to move the needle forward. I might like to throw in this one. We need to change our consumption habits and our production habits. I know this can be uncomfortable for each other because for people, because it means that it gives us a feeling like we're missing out or losing out when we say, oh, we need to change our consumption habits or buying habits. Consumption is just a fancy word for buying. But because we're over consuming, we're buying all of the stuff. It's not just that stuff that ends up getting wasted. There's so much stuff that gets wasted in even producing that thing. There's a whole chain behind that product that's leading to pollution and social inequity. I mean, someone that, the shirt that you bought, for example, someone worked on the farm that grew that cotton, or someone worked on an oil field extracting the oil that goes into your polyester sweater, and someone drove the truck from the oil refinery to the plant that gets processed, and someone drove you can't drive a boat. Do you steer a boat? Do you sail a boat? Maybe. Yeah. Someone sailed that boat across the world to drop it off. There's so much more that's behind the stuff that you buy than we realize, and I think we'll do a deep dive on that in future, because I think that's when we understand that concept, we can't unsee it or we can't unknow it. So as consumers, we can lead by example, we can educate others. I think we need to petition the businesses that we're buying from to making sure that they're labeling things correctly, to making sure that they're being transparent about their sustainability and circular practices. Of course, we need government initiatives, things like subsidies and tax breaks for circular businesses, or even tax breaks for taking your stuff to get repaired. And then we need to shift corporate responsibility a little bit. So again, encouraging businesses to move away from planned obsolescence, which just means they design an object to basically break or be phased out in a short period of time. So the Apple iPhones are a great example. One comes out every year. Everyone wants the newest version. Again, could talk forever about this. So I digress. We need to change our consumption habits and our production habits.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say in that same line what I was just mentioning, so I won't try to repeat myself, but basically more systemic thinking, which go back to more academia, more research about many things in nature that we assumed that we understood before, but now we realize that we didn't. So I will say a bit more than that, combined with the policymakers. And I think that for me will be the most important thing. Don't try to reinvent the wheel for things that we have already been doing good in the past. So I think this is also a topic that we will touch later on in more episodes, like different production process and so on that has been working very good before, and we haven't changed it in centuries. So all those kind of things, I think for me, it's super important. The more we understand the nature, the more we will respect their cycles, because the nature already have their cycles completely created and function in a perfect way. So the more we do that, I think the more we just catch on sustainability. So and of course sustainable development.
Absolutely. I think we could really stand to invent a drinking game with the amount of times that we say, don't reinvent the wheel.
Oh,
I
yeah.
can say that at least 5 times per episode. But
That
I
is
think,
very important.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think like one final thought on, you know, what we can do for action is, you know, the time for action firstly is now. What's the saying? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today, or something along those lines. So if we want to achieve the SDGs by 2030 or thereabouts, you know, we need to move from this place of ambition to thinking about them, to measuring things, to actually actioning these things. So that means all of us, governments, businesses, individuals, we're all stepping up together. I'm curious, maybe one last question before we wrap up. What is your favorite SDG? So for example, I think I've already alluded to this, but mine is SDG 12, responsible production and consumption. You may have gathered why, given my last response. And if you've listened to our first episode, I am a wastie. But Angelica, what do you reckon?
Oh, definitely 13, climate action. Yeah. For me, everything depends on the climate, right? I mean, sometimes humans, we think that we are more complex, that, you know, like in the laboratory in the university, when they put you like to grow bacterial populations and they put you like to increase or decrease the temperature. So based on that, it's completely the dynamic of the bacterial population. That's exactly what humans and every single activity that we have functions like. So based on the temperature, climate, and seasons, we have been developing our society. So that's why for me, this could be the objective.
If there was like a data goal, would you have chosen that one instead? Data for climate science?
No, I would definitely still say climate. Like we are like that population of bacteria, you know, like depending on the temperature we are based and raised and everything, that's exactly how we're going to develop every single aspect of our life or behaviors. And there's many documentaries about it that I think are super interesting, and maybe we can leave you the link on this episode.
Saeed, what's your favorite SDG?
I would go for 12, but you took it already.
Copycat.
I feel like, oh yeah, I have to choose something else.
We can share. It's okay.
You can share it.
Thanks for sharing. But the next I would go for 8, SDG 8. I think that because economical growth and have decent work is something that is essential for everyone to think beyond like the basics, and to think beyond like having having education, having food, having like house, or like you know, and that's the point where you start thinking about the future, about like future generation, and that's when you start think actually about sustainability in general. So I would go for that one.
Yeah, I love that. And economic growth, sustainable economic growth, and decent work applies to developed countries as well. I come from Wisconsin in the USA originally. Our minimum wage, tip-based minimum wage, is $2.13 an hour. Some wait, like my mom was a waitress at like a Pizza Hut, and like you could work a full week and your paycheck would just say, this is not a paycheck. The only money that you make, because that all goes to taxes, the only money you make is from tips. So that's a whole rabbit hole anyways, but the moral is no country is exempt from decent work and economic growth, or room to grow anyways. But I digress. Thank you both. I think maybe we'll leave it there. Again, as usual, we could talk forever about these topics. But so our key takeaways, right? So the SDGs provide us a framework for our sustainable future, but we're a tad bit behind. But circularity is a tool that can enable us to progress in the SDGs. So that's how they're linked. And everyone, again, this is probably the third or fourth time that I'm saying it, or we're saying it, is that everyone has a role, including government, business, individuals. Every level needs to act. So I think if you're curious about which SDG aligns most with your values and interests, you can take the SDG Take Action Today quiz. We'll put a link in the show notes. But once you've identified which SDGs you feel a bit more passionate about, then you can start to make a little bit more, take that next action, make one small change. So for example, if SDG 12 resonates with you, so again, that's responsible consumption and production, then you can try a plastic-free day or switch to refillable products. If you really gel with SDG 13, climate action, which Angelica does as well, you can try meat-free Mondays, or you can calculate your personal carbon footprint. Gender equality, SDG 5, your thing, you can support a women-owned business. I know Google has a function that actually tells you whether it's a women-owned business, or there's many registries available, country-specific, that you can check out women-owned business as well. But let's leave it there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to come to you next time. Get ready. We've got 2 guests coming for you. So we've got Tracy Sutton, founder of Root. She will be our next episode guest, and then the episode after that is Tomasz Slani, who's going to be talking to us about sustainable living in his own world. So we will see you back here next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a nice weekend.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Before we go, though, Millennials Gone Circular is a production of the Waste Not Spot. The Waste Not Spot recognizes the many traditional landowners around the world and their continued stewardship of our planet. We pay our respects and offer our deepest gratitude. Please leave a rating or review if you can.